Long ago, before iron cut the earth, and before rivers were bound by stone, there lived a people who carried the breath of the ancestors in every word they spoke. Their stories were not written in books, nor carved in stone. They were carried on the wind, etched in the smoke of sacred fires, and sung into the hearts of their children. And among those countless stories, there was one whispered only in hushed tones, one too heavy to be spoken aloud in daylight. It was the prophecy of ashes. The elders told it this way: a child will rise with the gift of the spirits, born with dreams that see beyond, and ears that hear what is hidden. But should she turn her back on the ancestors, her shadow will not follow her. It will be torn by the wind, scattered like ashes. Her name will not live in song. Her story will not be remembered. She will be nothing but silence. It was not merely a warning. It was a promise. In the heart of the village, the sacred fire burned without end. Its flame was more than warmth and light. It was the living bond between the people and the Great Spirit. Every dawn, a prayer was cast into it. Every dusk, stories were told beside it. And if ever the flame were to die, the elders believed the ancestors would turn their faces away. On a cold night, when the stars blazed brighter than torches and the snow lay deep upon the ground, a child was born under that very fire's glow. Her first cry was said to mingle with the crackle of the flame, as though the ancestors themselves had breathed life into her. Her name was spoken with reverence. She was not an ordinary child. From the earliest days, she dreamed of things that had not yet come. She could hear voices in the rustling leaves, in the song of rivers, even in the silence of the moonlit sky. The people called her blessed. Some called her chosen. And yet, even in her youth, the elders saw the weight she carried. Her grandmother, the wisest of the council, often placed her wrinkled hand upon the girl's head and whispered, "Child, the gifts of the spirits are heavy stones. They can build or they can crush. You must learn which you will carry." The girl would nod, but her eyes always lingered on the fire, drawn to its shifting, restless dance. Seasons passed. She grew tall, with hair dark as raven wings and eyes sharp as obsidian. Wherever she walked, whispers followed. Some voices filled with awe, others with envy. She was a living prophecy, though no one dared say it aloud. One winter evening, the elders gathered her by the fire. The circle of flames reflected in their solemn faces. The air was thick with cedar smoke, and the silence stretched long before one of them spoke. "Child of dreams," the oldest elder said, "your path nears a great crossing. The ancestors watch you closely. Their hands reach for you, but so too do the shadows. One day, you must choose to walk in harmony or to turn your back. If you choose wrongly, not even the spirits can save you." The words were not threats. They were truths, delivered like stone falling into water. The girl bowed her head, but deep inside, the ember of unease began to glow. That night, as the fire crackled and the stars swirled overhead, the village prepared for her vision ceremony. It was the rite given to all who carried spiritual gifts, a night of fasting, prayer, and dream-walking. By dawn, the ancestors would reveal a glimpse of the path ahead. The fire blazed higher than ever before. The drums of the people echoed into the forest. Her grandmother painted her face with ash and whispered a prayer that only the ancestors could hear. Then, alone, the girl lay upon a blanket of pine boughs, eyes closed, listening to the fire's crackle, waiting for dreams to come. At first, she drifted into silence, the quiet hum of the earth itself. Then the vision began. She stood at the edge of a vast plain, the sky heavy with storm clouds. A single fire burned before her, brighter than the sun, its flames reaching high into the heavens. She knew at once. This was the sacred fire, the same flame that bound her people to the Great Spirit. But she was not alone. From the shadows came the beating of wings, slow, deliberate. A figure landed beside the fire, a raven, blacker than night, with eyes like embers. Its wings spread wide, blotting out the stars. The raven tilted its head, watching her with a gaze that pierced like a blade. Then, with a sudden cry, it leaped into the fire. The flames did not consume it. They roared higher, swallowing the bird in a violent storm of sparks. The raven's wings burned, its shadow stretching across the plain like a wound upon the earth. The girl cried out, but her voice vanished in the roar of the flames, and then the fire faltered. It dimmed, it flickered, as if struggling to survive. She reached forward, desperate to keep it alive, but the raven's voice cut through the smoke. "Child of dreams, some fires are meant to die." She gasped awake, the echo of those words still burning in her ears. The sacred fire of the village crackled before her, alive and strong, but her heart pounded with dread. The elders approached, watching her with knowing eyes. They had not seen her dream, but they felt its weight in the air, as if the spirits themselves had pressed their warning upon every soul in the village. The girl tried to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. The prophecy of ashes stirred in her memory, like embers waiting to burst into flame. That night, as the wind howled across the village, and the fire cast long, dancing shadows upon the lodge walls, the girl lay awake with only one thought echoing through her mind. Why did the raven enter the flames? And though she tried to push the question away, the answer whispered back from the darkness, an answer she feared but could not ignore. The raven had come for her. The sacred fire burned at the heart of the village, as it always had, as it always must. Day and night, through storms and seasons, its flame was never left alone. The elders said it was not merely wood and smoke, it was the breath of the ancestors, the bridge between the living and the Great Spirit. Every dawn, as the sun lifted its face above the horizon, the people sang to it. Every dusk, as stars gathered in the night sky, they danced in its glow. To keep the fire alive was to keep their people alive. The young woman, she who dreamed the raven, grew up in its light. Her earliest memories were of sitting cross-legged by the flames, listening to the old stories. The elders spoke of rivers that flowed with memory, of forests that sang with spirit, of animals who carried wisdom if one learned how to listen. The tribe lived in harmony with those things. Hunters prayed before loosing arrows, asking the deer's forgiveness. Gatherers whispered thanks when plucking berries from the bush. Even children knew the land was not theirs to own, it was theirs to honor. Yet among all these practices, 3 were most sacred. A chant sung at twilight, weaving the voices of the people into a single river of sound, calling to those who had walked before, performed when the moon was full, where every step was a prayer to keep harmony between earth, sky, and spirit, and most sacred of all, the fire that must never die. If the flame faltered, the people believed the ancestors would turn their backs, leaving the tribe to wander in darkness. It was this fire that watched the girl grow into a woman, and it was this fire that burned stronger whenever she stood near, as though recognizing her. The people admired her. Some said the fire favored her, just as the spirits did. When she walked among them, eyes followed. Hunters sought her blessing before the chase. Mothers asked her to sing to their infants, believing her voice carried protection. But admiration is a dangerous seed. Alongside respect grew envy. Whispers rose among some of the young warriors, who saw her gifts as proof she was destined to lead heaven above them. One warrior in particular carried this bitterness. His name was Caskin, broad-shouldered and fierce. He had long trained to be the tribe's protector. But no matter how many hunts he led, no matter how many victories he claimed, the people's eyes still returned to the girl of visions. He envied her gift, and envy, when fed, grows into shadow. The girl's grandmother, the eldest voice of the council, saw all of this with quiet eyes. She had lived long enough to know that fire gives warmth, but also burns. She often warned her granddaughter with gentle words. "Child, the fire's glow draws many near, but not all who come seek its warmth. Some only wish to steal its light." The girl would nod, though her heart struggled to understand. She wanted to believe her people loved her, without shadow, without doubt. Yet that very night, her gift spoke to her in ways she could not ignore. As the village slept, she lay upon her bedding of furs, lulled by the steady crackle of the sacred fire outside. The warmth seeped into her, and soon dreams opened. Like a path, she found herself standing in a moonlit meadow. The air was still, too still, and the sky above glowed silver. From the trees, a figure emerged, tall, lean, with fur the color of midnight and eyes bright as stars. A wolf. Its paws made no sound as it stepped toward her. The girl felt no fear. She knew at once this was a guide sent by the ancestors. The wolf circled her slowly, its gaze never leaving hers. Then it stopped, its breath rising like mist in the cool night air. Its voice was not heard with ears, but with the heart. "You walk a path watched by many," the wolf whispered. "But remember this, not all shadows walk beside you. Some follow, waiting for you to stumble." The girl's chest tightened. She wished to ask what danger lurked, who the shadow belonged to, but before she could speak, the wolf lifted its head and howled. The sound echoed through the dream like thunder across mountains. She jolted awake, her body trembling. Outside, the sacred fire still burned, but in its glow she thought she saw shapes moving in the smoke shadows, long and twisting, reaching toward her. The next morning, she carried the dream in silence. She wanted to believe her people's admiration was true, that no envy lived among them. Yet the wolf's words gnawed at her like teeth. At the fire circle, as the tribe gathered to sing the song of the ancestors, she lifted her voice with theirs. But for the first time, she felt something beneath the harmony, a note of discord, faint but real. Her grandmother's eyes met hers, across the flames. The old woman seemed to know, without words, that her granddaughter's dreams had begun to show not only light, but shadow. The girl pressed her hands together in prayer, but the wolf's warning whispered in her mind, louder than the chant, louder than the drums. "Not all shadows walk beside you." That night, when the fire cast restless shadows and the wind carried voices only spirits could understand, the young woman dreamed again. She found herself standing at the edge of a vast, black plain. No stars shone above. No moon guided her steps. Only silence stretched across the land, so deep it pressed against her chest like stone. Then came the sound, slow, deliberate, heavy as thunder. The beating of wings. From the darkness, a figure emerged. Its wings spread wide, swallowing what little light remained. A raven, taller than any man, with feathers that shimmered like wet obsidian. Its eyes burned like twin coals, smoldering with hunger. The raven tilted its head, studying her as if it had been waiting for this moment. Its voice came not from its beak, but from the shadows around her, slipping into her ears like smoke. "Child of dreams," it croaked, "you stand in the light of fire that is not your own. The people praise you, but they do not see you. They see only the gift. Do you not wonder why the ancestors placed such weight upon you? Why you alone must carry their chains?" The girl's heart quickened. She remembered her grandmother's warnings. She remembered the wolf's voice, "Not all shadows walk beside you." But the raven's words pierced her doubts. She had wondered. She had asked herself why the burden was hers, why others envied her gift while she alone carried its loneliness. "I was told the ancestors chose me for harmony," she whispered, her voice shaking. The raven's laugh rolled like distant thunder. "Harmony, balance, these are chains, child. The ancestors bind you to their old ways because they fear what you might become. But I see you. I see the fire in your blood. I can give you what they hide." The shadows thickened around her. For a moment, she thought she saw faces in the dark, warriors bowing, storms breaking at her command, even the dead rising at her call. The raven's wings stretched wider. "With me, you will not serve the fire, you will command it. You will bend the wind, Call the storms, even silence death itself. Power beyond the reach of your elders. Power to carve your own path, unshackled from their whispers. Her breath caught. The ancestors had always taught humility, that no one should reach higher than the sky or dig deeper than the roots of the earth. But here, before her, was the promise of more. The girl turned away, pressing her hands to her ears, whispering prayers she had been taught since childhood. The Great Spirit watches. The ancestors guide me. I must walk with balance. I must walk with balance. But the raven's voice only grew louder. Balance is weakness. Balance is silence. Look at your people, they bow to fire, to trees, to rivers. Do they bow to you? No. They fear you. They envy you. Even now, they whisper behind your back. The wolf warned you, did it not? Shadows follow you. I am not your enemy. I am your only truth. The girl trembled. She wanted to run, to wake from this dream, but her feet were rooted in the dark plain. The raven stepped closer, its eyes burning brighter, its wings folding until it loomed directly before her. Then, from beneath its breast, it drew forth a single feather. It was blacker than night, yet it shimmered with a cold fire, a flame that gave no warmth. The feather burned, but not with heat. It was ice, bitter and sharp, searing her skin without touch. Take it, the raven hissed, a gift. No ancestor, no elder, no wolf can grant you what I offer. Take it, and the chains of the old ways will shatter. You will know power no one dares speak of. The girl's hand shook. She remembered her grandmother's eyes, filled with love and warning. She remembered the elder's words about choice, about the path of loyalty or betrayal. Her lips whispered, almost without sound, I must not, and yet, the hunger stirred in her heart. The visions the raven showed, earthworms bending at her will, shadows obeying her call burned hotter than fear. Slowly, as if her body no longer belonged to her, she reached out. Her fingers brushed the feather. A shock tore through her arm, colder than ice, sharper than a blade. She gasped, pulling back, but the feather clung to her palm as if fused to her. The raven's laughter rose around her, echoing through the plain. Yes, you are mine now. The fire will bow, the storm will kneel, and death itself will turn its face when you call. The girl looked down. The feather lay in her hand, glowing, with a dark light, a flame that devoured instead of giving. Terror and awe battled in her chest. She wanted to throw it away, to rid herself of its touch, but some part of her clutched it tightly, as though afraid to lose it. The raven spread its wings and began to dissolve into the shadows. Keep it, child of dreams. When the day comes that the fire falters, you will know your true strength. And when that day comes, the ancestors will be nothing but ashes. She jolted awake, breathless, sweat beading on her skin. The sacred fire still burned outside, but for the first time in her life, it seemed weaker, smaller. She rubbed her hands together, half convinced the feather had been a dream. But when she looked down, her palms still bore a faint black mark, like soot that would not wash away. The fire crackled sharply, and for the briefest moment, it flickered its flame, dipping as though gasping for breath. The girl's heart pounded. She clutched her hand to her chest. The raven's words echoed once more, whispering from the dark corners of her mind. Some fires are meant to die. The morning after the raven's gift, the girl awoke with a tremor in her hands. The black feather burned faintly in her mind, even if it was not in her grasp. At first, she tried to dismiss it, to return to the simple life of the village. But the world seemed different now. Birds shied from her when she stepped into the forest. Deer froze and fled even before her shadow touched the leaves. Fish scattered in the river at her approach. Even children, who had once clung to her voice, like warmth, cried at night, unsettled by dreams they could not explain. Power, she realized, came with a price. Harmony was the first casualty. Despite this, she could not deny the thrill of her new abilities. When she whispered, winds bent at her command. When she concentrated, rivers shifted their course slightly, responding to her thought. The forest seemed to lean toward her presence, waiting for her signal. At first, she tried to hide it. She told herself she would use it only for small tasks, helping hunters find lost prey, guiding a stream to the crops that needed water. But each act brought stronger sensations, a heady rush that made her pulse quicken and her heart pound. And with each rush, doubt began to grow toward the elders. "Why do they tell me what I cannot do?" she muttered one evening, pacing near the sacred fire. "Why must I bow to these old ways? These chants, these dances, these rituals, they bind me, not the world." The elders had always spoken with patience, guiding her to walk with balance. But now, she felt that their lessons were chains, restraining the very gift the raven had shown her. The fire in her blood refused to be contained. The imbalance became noticeable to the tribe. Hunters returned empty-handed, claiming that the animals sensed something they could not name. Crops along the river grew uneven. The water seemed to rise and fall at odd hours. Even the weather shifted in subtle ways. Fog lingered too long, winds came with sudden violence, and storms appeared without warning. The elders whispered among themselves. They recognized signs of a spirit disturbed. They recognized the hand of a raven in their midst. Her grandmother, older now, with the firelight dancing across her lined face, spoke to her gently one evening. "Child, the ancestors see through the raven's lies. They have watched you take what is not yours. You must remember the path, or all you cherish will wither." The girl's eyes flashed. She wanted to argue, to tell her grandmother that she had been shown a greater truth. But even as she opened her mouth, a part of her felt unease, a whisper of caution that made her hesitate. The sacred fire, ever vigilant, flickered strangely as she stood near it that night. The drum circle began for a ritual gathering, voices rising in the song of the ancestors. The villagers formed a circle around the fire, each step and movement designed to honor the balance that had held their people for generations. But the girl could not wait for the fire to guide her. She stepped forward, raising her hands to the sky, and began to chant. The words were not her own, they were old, foreign, ancient in a way she did not understand, yet felt in her bones. The fire responded. Flames leaped higher, twisting and reaching as though in fear or anticipation. The air crackled with energy that made the hair on her arms stand on end. Those gathered gasped, some with awe, some with terror. The wind whipped around the village in an unnatural swirl. Leaves spun like tiny dancers caught in a whirlwind. Distant clouds roiled, darkening the moon's glow. The sacred fire blinked, dimmed, and pulsed as if in warning. The girl felt exhilaration unlike anything before. She was the storm, she was the river, the wind, the fire itself. But the elders' faces told her everything she needed to know. Shock, fear, sadness. "Stop," her grandmother cried, stepping forward, voice breaking. "Do not speak the words you do not understand. The ancestors will not forgive this." The girl's chest heaved. For the first time, doubt clawed at her. But she could not stop chanting. The power was intoxicating, seductive, and it would not be denied. Lightning struck nearby, illuminating the terrified faces of her people. The wind tore at clothing, at hair, at small fires nearby. The sacred circle became chaos as the villagers scrambled to hold the fire steady. The girl's hands glowed with dark energy. She realized, suddenly, that she had gone beyond guidance. She had trespassed into a place forbidden, where mortals were not meant to tread. And then just as quickly as it began, the wind ceased. The flames of the sacred fire, still breathing, flickered with unease. The storm above broke apart and vanished, leaving only the cold night. Silence fell over the village, heavy and trembling. The girl sank to her knees, chest heaving. Around her, The villagers whispered among themselves, fear and awe in equal measure. Some eyes that had admired her now looked with suspicion. Others stared in wonder, afraid to question what they had just seen. Her grandmother approached, kneeling beside her. She laid a trembling hand on the girl's shoulder. "Child, you have walked too far into shadows. The ancestors did not grant you this for glory. You have chosen a path that will demand a price." The girl's mind was torn. Excitement, guilt, fear all swirled together like a storm inside her. She thought of the raven's feather burning in her palm, the promise of power, the knowledge that now she had tasted a gift beyond mortal limits. She had crossed a line, and as the villagers worked to restore the fire, the girl understood that nothing would ever be the same. The balance had been broken, and her first act of betrayal had set her on a path from which she might never return. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying a voice she knew in her bones, the wolf from her dreams, the guide she had trusted. It murmured softly, warning her even now, not all shadows walk beside you. The night began quietly, as nights often do in the village, with the sacred fire burning steadily at its heart. But a darkness had settled upon the girl's spirit, a storm building that no mortal eye could see until the first rumble of thunder tore across the sky. It was not the usual roll of distant clouds. This was deep, shaking, as if the earth itself cried out in warning. The wind rose, carrying voices from the past, whispers from the ancestors, voices of warning, fear, and sorrow all tangled together. She stood in the village square, eyes closed, arms raised, feeling the air bend around her. The wind tugged at her hair, whipped through the trees, and rattled the lodges, carrying the scent of wet earth and smoke. The villagers ran to her, their faces pale, fear in their eyes. Mothers clutched their children. Hunters dropped their bows. Even the elders, long accustomed to the girl's gifts, trembled. "Stop," they shouted. "The ancestors cry. You will destroy us all." But the girl did not move. She did not falter. The taste of power was sharp on her tongue, intoxicating and overwhelming. Every pulse of the storm felt like a heartbeat of her own blood. Every crack of thunder was a note in a song she alone could sing. And in the shadows of her mind, the raven's voice whispered, smooth as silk and dark as night, "They do not deserve your light. Rise above them. Show them what you were born to be." Her eyes opened, glowing faintly like embers. The wind answered her call. Leaves spun violently, sweeping through the village paths. Dust and ash rose like spirits fleeing the earth. Even the sacred fire symbol of balance and the ancestors' favor flickered and bent, as if struggling to breathe. "What would you do?" the raven murmured in her mind. "If power whispered in your ear, would you resist or fall?" The villagers screamed in terror. They banged drums, chanted prayers, and circled the sacred fire, trying to steady its trembling flames. But it was no longer there. Fire alone, it was hers, and hers alone, drawn into a dangerous dance of shadow and flame. Her grandmother stepped forward, eyes wide with grief. "Child, remember the path. The ancestors do not bless this. You risk everything, our people, the land, the sacred bond." But the girl's heart beat only for the storm, for the thrill, for the dangerous truth the raven had shown her. The whispers of morality, of humility, of balance, were drowned beneath the roar of the wind and the thrill of the storm. Thunder split the sky with blinding light. Rain lashed the village like whip-thin needles. The river swelled and churned, angry and unpredictable, spilling over its banks. Trees bent beneath the force of the gusts, their roots exposed, shaking the earth. The sacred fire wavered, its flames flickering low, struggling to survive in the storm she had summoned. It cast long, trembling shadows across the terrified faces of her people. The ancestors' warning was clear. Trust had been broken. And then it happened. A single lightning bolt struck the heart of the forest beyond the village. It split a sacred tree, the one that had stood since before memory, the one believed to carry the spirits of the ancestors right down the middle. The crack of its fall echoed across the plains like a drum of mourning. The girl's breath caught. For a moment, she thought of turning away, of stopping, of seeking forgiveness. But the raven's whisper was louder than her conscience. "Do you see? They do not deserve your light. Take it. Rise." Her hands trembled, and yet she did not lower them. She had tasted the storm. She had felt the thrill of bending the elements to her will. The village, the sacred fire, even the ancestors themselves, they all seemed distant now, shadows she could ignore. Lightning flashed again, striking closer this time. Sparks leaped from the trees, dancing across the ground, igniting small fires that spread with the wind. The villagers scrambled, trying desperately to save their homes, their animals, their sacred fire. In the heart of the chaos, the girl felt something she had never felt before, a surge of absolute power, intoxicating and complete. The wind followed her will, the fire obeyed her call, and the rain answered her breath. For the first time in her life, she felt unstoppable. But even as she reveled, a quiet part of her small and nearly forgotten shivered with fear. She glimpsed the fallen sacred tree, the trembling faces of the elders, and the frightened children. And beneath all that, she heard the whisper of the wolf from her dreams, faint but insistent. "Not all shadows walk beside you." The storm howled louder, carrying both triumph and terror. Lightning arced across the sky again, and the sacred fire wavered as if pleading for mercy. And at that moment, she understood in a way that chilled her to the bone. She had crossed a line. She had claimed a power not meant for mortals, a power that could destroy the very people she once loved. The sky rumbled, and the air seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere in the distance, a branch cracked sharply, a prelude to something larger, something she could not yet see. The raven's whisper returned, soft, insidious, and hungry. "The fire bends, the wind obeys. You are not a child of balance. You are a child of power. Claim it." Her hands lifted higher, her voice rising in an unearthly chant. The storm answered, the sacred fire quivered, and the village trembled under the weight of her choice. Then lightning struck the sacred tree again, this time splitting it entirely in two. The sound rolled like a drum of warning through the hearts of every living thing. The girl froze, her chest heaving. She realized the full weight of her actions, but the raven's voice still sang in her mind, promising more, urging her on. The storm had begun, but the consequences were only just waking. The dawn, after the storm, brought silence. The village, usually alive with the sound of the river and birdsong, was still. Smoke from the small fires burned unevenly, carrying the scent of wet wood and scorched earth. Broken branches littered the paths, and the sacred fire trembled in its hearth, its flames weaker than they had ever been. The elders gathered immediately. Their faces were solemn, lined with worry and sorrow. They had watched the storm rage, seen the sacred tree split, felt the imbalance that now hung over their people like a shadow, and they had made a decision. The council of elders spoke in the great lodge, their voices heavy with grief. "Child of the prophecy," the eldest began, his eyes fixed on her, "you have strayed from the path of balance. You have summoned storms, broken sacred trust, and endangered the lives of all who live in this village. The ancestors have spoken, and their warning is clear. You must repent. You must relinquish the gifts you do not yet understand." The girl stood tall, the black feather still pulsing faintly in her mind. Her chest heaved with the thrill of the power that surged through her veins. She remembered the raven's words, its promises of storms, death, and command over all, and she laughed, a sound that startled even the elders. "Repent," she said, her voice echoing like thunder. "Why should I repent? The spirits themselves have chosen me, above all. The power I wield is mine, and theirs to follow, if they dare." I owe nothing to these old ways. I owe nothing to anyone." A hush fell over the lodge. The elders exchanged glances, sorrow and fear mingling in their eyes. "Then you leave us no choice," the eldest said quietly, though his voice carried the weight of finality. "You are exiled. Your name will not be spoken in our songs or stories. You are removed from the circle of the living and the ancestors alike. Go, and take with you the shadow you have chosen." The girl's heart surged with anger. Pride flared like the wildfire of the storm she had conjured. How dare they deny her? How dare they dismiss the gift that burned so brightly within her? "You will regret this," she spat, her voice trembling with fury. "You will beg for my return, for the mercy you have denied me. You will see what it means to deny the power that the spirits themselves have given me." The elders said nothing, their faces calm but unyielding. They had made their choice, as the ancestors had guided them to do. She turned away from the lodge, stepping past the trembling sacred fire and the trembling people who had once praised her. Every footstep carried the weight of defiance, and every glance she cast backward was a silent curse upon those she left behind. The forest welcomed her, but not as it had before. The wind whispered through the branches in warning, and the animals, her companions, watched from a distance with cautious eyes. She felt the emptiness of exile like a physical weight pressing on her shoulders. Night fell, and with it, the shadows deepened. She wrapped herself in furs, the black feather burning faintly in her mind, a constant reminder of the choice she had made. Rage, pride, and grief swirled together, forming a storm that mirrored the one she had unleashed upon her village. And in that darkness, she heard it. A familiar beat of wings, slower this time, deliberate and heavy. "Child of dreams," came the whisper, silky and dark, curling around her mind like smoke. "You have chosen. You have turned your back. You have embraced the shadow. Now, you belong to me." The raven appeared, larger than she remembered, its eyes glowing like twin embers in the night. The black feathers shimmered with an otherworldly light, and its presence filled the clearing, pressing on her like the weight of the storm itself. "I promised you power," it said, "and power you shall have. But know this: the path you walk is no longer yours alone. The ancestors have abandoned it. The fire of the village grows dim, and I am your guide through what comes next." The girl's chest heaved, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. For the first time, she realized the full depth of her choice. She was free from the village, yes, but only to walk a path, shadowed and dangerous, one where the line between power and destruction blurred like smoke in the wind. "Yes," she whispered, almost to herself, "I am yours. Show me what I can become." The raven circled her, wings beating in the cold night, carrying whispers of storms, shadows, and promises of power beyond mortal reckoning. The black feather, once a mere token, now seemed to pulse, in tune with the beating of her heart. She clutched it tightly, feeling it connect her to the raven in ways she could not yet understand. In the distance, the village slept unaware of the shadow that now walked beyond its borders. The sacred fire continued to flicker, struggling to burn in the aftermath of the storm, a silent witness to the betrayal that had begun. The girl, exiled and defiant, felt both fear and exhilaration, knowing that the path she had chosen was irreversible. Behind her lay the village, the ancestors' trust, the fire that had once been her guide. Ahead lay the raven, shadows, and the promise of power and, perhaps, in the dark corners of her soul, the beginning of a lesson she would one day understand. The wind whispered around her once more, carrying the raven's voice like a dark lullaby. "Now, child of dreams, the world is yours, and mine. Let us see what shadows can become." The wilderness stretched endlessly around her, dark and unyielding. Trees loomed like silent sentinels, their twisted branches scraping the sky. The rivers that once guided her steps now seemed to shy away, their waters curling back from her touch as if burned by her presence. Even the wind carried a coldness that bit at her skin. She had chosen exile, chosen power, chosen the raven. Yet, in the solitude of the forest, she began to feel the weight of what she had done. The raven had promised her dominion over storm and fire, whispers of control over life and death itself, and at first it had seemed true. She had bent the wind to her will, called storms and rivers, made even the trees shiver at her touch. But now, in the emptiness of the wilderness, the gifts that once thrilled her brought only torment. Nightmares came without warning. Dreams of the raven twisted into grotesque forms, a black bird larger than the moon, wings blotting out the sky, eyes burning coals that pierced her very soul. Its voice, once a velvet whisper of promise, became a shriek that echoed in her mind, rattling her teeth, clawing at her thoughts. "You are mine," it hissed. "You are not free. You belong to the shadows." Sleep brought no comfort. When she closed her eyes, visions of fire consuming her village haunted her, flames that devoured not just homes, but the faces of those she had once loved. She saw children screaming in the wind, hunters bowing in fear, and the sacred fire quivering as if struggling to survive. Even her gift of visions, once a blessing, now betrayed her. She could see only death and decay, the unraveling of life around her. Rivers dried at her steps. Animals fled, sensing the imbalance she carried like a stain. Every bird that passed overhead caught in warning. Every deer leaped in terror. Nature itself recoiled from her presence. She fell to her knees by a once clear brook, cupping her hands to drink. The water recoiled, splitting around her fingers like fleeing spirits. Her reflection shimmered in the darkened pool, and for the first time, she saw not a blessed child of the ancestors but a shadow of her former self, eyes hollow, lips trembling with grief and fear. "Why do you torment me so?" she whispered into the night. "Ancestors, why are you silent?" The silence that answered was absolute. No voice, no guidance, no comfort. The ancestors she had once prayed to, whose whispers had guided her hand since childhood, were gone. They had turned their backs, leaving her alone to wander, to feel the full cost of betrayal. The raven perched silently above her, wings folded, its eyes gleaming in the dark. It offered no comfort, no guidance, only the knowledge that she had chosen this path and that it could not be undone. "Could you live?" it seemed to whisper through the trees, "if the voices of your ancestors turned their backs on you?" She did not answer. She could not. The wilderness around her seemed to close in with every heartbeat, pressing her into herself. The once comforting silence now felt like accusation, like a mirror reflecting the shadow she had become. That night, she slept fitfully, though the dreams that found her were not gentle. The raven hovered in every vision, sometimes speaking, sometimes silent, but always there, a reminder of her debt, her bondage. And then, through the swirling nightmares, she saw a familiar figure, her grandmother, the wise elder who had always guided her, whose eyes had looked upon her with love and patience. Relief rushed through her chest at first. The thought that she might still find comfort, that guidance might reach her even now, brought a glimmer of hope. But the hope shattered, instantly. As she reached for her grandmother in the dream, the woman's face began to twist, then crumble, dissolving into ashes that scattered like smoke on the wind. Her voice, once soft and kind, became a wail of sorrow, echoing through the dreamscape. "You were warned," the ashes whispered. "You were warned, child, and you chose the shadow." The girl screamed, waking with sweat streaming down her face, chest heaving, hands trembling. The forest around her seemed to sigh, mournful and empty. The wind carried no promise, no song of ancestors, only the faint echo of the raven's laughter. Curling through the trees, she curled against a tree, shivering in the darkness, feeling the full weight of her choices. She had power, yes, but it was hollow. She had freedom, but only to wander alone. She had strength, but strength without balance, without love, without guidance, was a curse disguised as a gift. Even the black feather, once a promise of dominion, now burned in her mind like a brand, reminding her that she was no longer hers, no longer part of the world she had known. She belonged to the raven, to the shadows, to the consequences she had chosen to ignore. In the morning, she rose, the sun cold on her face. The wilderness stretched endlessly before her, unwelcoming, unyielding, a reflection of her own spirit. She had survived storms, exiled herself, and defied the ancestors. But the cost was written into every leaf, every river, every creature she saw. The raven appeared at her shoulder, silent now, wings folded like a cloak of darkness. Its presence was both comforting and terrifying, a reminder that she had chosen this path, and that there was no turning back. The path is long, child of dreams, it whispered, and the shadows will show you what the fire could not. Learn, endure, and remember, you are mine. And the girl knew it to be true. Alone in the wilderness, abandoned by the ancestors, hunted by shadows, she was no longer the child of the village. She was something else, something powerful, something cursed, something bound to the raven and the darkness it carried. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying a warning she could not ignore. And in the stillness of the forest, she understood her first true lesson. Power without balance is a prison, and betrayal leaves scars, not only on the world, but on the soul. While the girl wandered the wilderness, bound to shadows and the raven's dark guidance, the village she had left behind began to crumble under the weight of her betrayal. At first, the changes were subtle. Fish disappeared from the riverbanks. Birds that once heralded the dawn stayed hidden in the treetops. But soon, the effects grew harsher. Crops withered under unrelenting heat and frost in turns that no one could predict. The hunters returned with empty hands, exhausted and demoralized. Even the animals they relied upon for sustenance had grown skittish and scarce, avoiding the village entirely. Children fell ill with mysterious fevers, their cries echoing through the lodges. Mothers wept, clutching blankets and herbs, while fathers cursed the wind that had always brought them life. The elders gathered in urgency, recognizing the signs of imbalance they had long feared. "The Great Spirit is angry," the eldest whispered to the council. His eyes scanned the village, lingering on the trembling sacred fire. "This is no ordinary misfortune. The balance has been broken, and we know why." It was not spoken aloud at first. The knowledge of her betrayal was a wound too fresh to name. Yet all hearts understood. The girl, once beloved, had severed the invisible threads that tied the tribe to the ancestors and the natural world. The elders convened a council of urgency in the great lodge, the smell of sage and cedar smoke curling through the air. They spoke in hushed tones, their voices trembling with fear and sorrow. "We must act," said one elder, her hands trembling as she held a carved staff. "The people suffer, the fire falters, the rivers run dry. We cannot stand idle." The rituals they performed were long, precise, and exhausting. Drums beat in rhythm with chants of protection, and incense filled the lodge with smoke meant to cleanse and restore. The villagers followed with solemnity, lighting candles, singing songs of reverence, and offering thanks to the spirits that had always guided them. But the whispers of the unseen grew louder as they worked. Shadows flickered along the edges of the firelight. The wind carried voices that seemed not of this world, mocking, lamenting, warning. "The wound is too deep," one elder murmured. Perhaps the child herself must be sacrificed. Only then might the Great Spirit forgive us. A hush fell. The words were unthinkable, unutterable, yet the truth behind them hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to break. "Destroy her," another elder whispered, horror etched in their eyes. "She is still a child, though lost to shadow. Can we bear to do this?" "It is not our choice," the eldest replied solemnly. "The spirits demand balance, and balance cannot be restored without a reckoning. We can only hope that mercy and justice walk hand in hand. Meanwhile, the village itself felt the growing tension. The sacred fire flickered with unease, flames bending away from the edges of the hearth. The wind howled through the open spaces of the lodges, carrying the scent of ash and storm. Mothers pressed their children close, whispering prayers for protection. Fathers knelt by the riverbanks, scattering offerings into the water, hoping that the spirits might hear them and return favor. The crops continued to fail. The rivers slowed to a crawl. Even the animals that had once roamed freely seemed to whisper in warning, moving along paths that avoided the village entirely. In every heartbeat, in every breath of wind, the villagers felt the absence of her presence, not as a child returned, but as a wound in the world itself. The girl's exile had not merely removed her. It had left a scar on the very fabric of life, and the Great Spirit's displeasure weighed heavily upon them all. And then, as twilight descended, a new sign appeared at the edge of the village. The wolf spirit, the same guardian that had once guided the girl in dreams, emerged from the trees. Its fur shimmered with the pale light of the setting sun, and its eyes glowed with quiet intensity. It lifted its head and howled, a mournful sound that rolled across the plains and into the mountains where she wandered. The howl carried both warning and sorrow, echoing through the lodges and fields alike. The villagers paused, listening. The elders recognized the meaning immediately. The wolf had come to report, to remind, and perhaps to plead. "She walks in, Shadow," the eldest whispered, "and yet, the wolf still calls. The balance is not beyond hope, but the path is narrow, and the price may yet be paid." The howl cut through the air again, long and haunting, as if the forest itself joined in lamentation. Mothers clutched their children tighter, hunters stiffened their shoulders, and the elders stared toward the mountains, knowing that the child they had once loved now lost to shadows, and the raven was the source of their suffering. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of smoke, river water, and the faint, icy trace of the black feather she had taken. The sacred fire trembled again, and a chill passed through every heart in the village. The whispers of the ancestors, long silent since her betrayal, seemed to murmur in fragmented echoes, warnings, cries, and fragments of a promise unfulfilled. The elders turned to each other, faces pale, knowing that the next choice, to attempt another ritual, to confront the shadow, or to make the ultimate sacrifice, would determine the fate of the tribe. And from the mountains, carried on the wind, the wolf's howl answered them in a sorrowful refrain, reminding all who heard it that the child of dreams had become a force far beyond their control. Balance had been broken. The Great Spirit demanded a reckoning, and the shadows in which she now walked would not relent until their hunger was sated. The mountains were shrouded in mist when the first warriors arrived, guided by the wolf spirit. Its howl had echoed through valleys and forests, leading them across the rugged terrain with unerring precision. Every step felt heavy with purpose, every breath tinged with the chill of the approaching reckoning. At the summit of a craggy ridge, they found her. The girl stood alone, the wind bending around her, as if in fear. Her body was cloaked in raven feathers that shimmered with dark light, and her eyes glowed with a shadow that seemed to stretch beyond mortal bounds. The black feather she had taken long ago pulsed faintly, tethering her to the raven's will. The elders stepped forward, chanting in low, steady voices, invoking the names of the ancestors and the Great Spirit. Their drums beat in rhythm with the pulse of the mountains, calling the girl back to the path she had abandoned. "Child of dreams," the eldest said, voice trembling yet firm, "we do not come to harm you. We come to remind you of who you are, of what you were meant to be. Release your pride. Return to the ancestors. Release the shadows and walk in the light again." The girl laughed, a sound that rolled like thunder through the peaks. Her hands rose, and the wind answered, whipping around the ridge in violent spirals. Shadows stretched and writhed, creeping along the rocks and reaching toward the warriors. Like living tendrils? Return, she hissed, eyes gleaming with dark fire. Return to a path I have abandoned. You cannot understand the power I now hold. I am no longer bound by your fire, your chants, or your ancestors. I am my own and I am theirs to fear. With a motion of her hands, clouds darkened the sky, and lightning danced along the mountaintops. The warriors shielded themselves, drums beating frantic warnings. The wind screamed like a living thing, carrying the girl's defiance across the mountains. The wolf spirit appeared at her side, its fur bristling, eyes locked on the raven shadow that lingered in her mind. For a moment, the girl's control seemed absolute. The storm, the shadows, the black feathers, they were extensions of her will. You have been deceived, the wolf growled, voice echoing like rolling thunder. The raven you serve is not your guide. It is a spirit of hunger and betrayal, feeding on your pride and tormenting your people. The girl staggered, as if a seed of doubt had pierced the armor of her defiance. Lies, she cried, summoning shadows into sharp, clawed forms that lashed out at the wolf. The wolf leaped, claws gleaming, biting through the dark feathers that seemed to cling to her like a second skin. Sparks of shadow exploded where talon met feather, illuminating the ridge with brief, unnatural light. The girl screamed, both from the physical sting and the realization that the raven's influence was not absolute. The elders, seeing the struggle, intensified their chants, calling the ancestors with renewed fervor. They sang of balance, of life, of harmony with the Great Spirit, their voices intertwining with the crackle of the storm and the howl of the wolf. Release the shadows, one elder shouted. You are still the child of the ancestors. Do not let the raven destroy what we have all loved. But the girl's pride held fast. She raised her arms, summoning lightning and shadow in a swirling vortex. The mountain trembled, rocks dislodging from cliffs and tumbling into the valleys below. Her laughter, mingled with fear and exhilaration, rolled through the clouds. And then the raven revealed itself. It emerged from the shadows she had so faithfully obeyed, larger and more terrifying than she had ever imagined. Its feathers were black as night, eyes glowing red with hunger. The voice, now thunderous and cruel, echoed through the mountains. If she falls, it shrieked, part of the tribe falls with her. The girl faltered, hearing the magnitude of the threat. She realized, for the first time, that the bond she had formed with the raven was not a gift, but a chain. Its hunger for destruction was unyielding, and the consequences of defiance were more than personal, they were communal, threatening the very life of the people she had once loved. The wolf lunged again, breaking through the shadowed feathers, claws striking true. The raven shrieked, flapping with a fury that rattled the mountains. The girl stumbled backward, struggling to maintain control of the storm, feeling the shadow inside her recoil at the wolf's assault. The warriors pressed closer, but they dared not attack directly, fearing both the storm and the darkness emanating from the girl. The elders continued their chants, hands raised, calling on the ancestors to shield her from complete corruption, and perhaps, if the Great Spirit willed it, to guide her back to the path of balance. In the chaos, the girl felt the first pang of fear, not for herself, but for the tribe. The raven's shriek had revealed the stakes. Her pride, her defiance, and her hunger for power had consequences beyond her. Every bolt of lightning, every shadowed claw, every gust of wind reminded her of the destruction she had sown. The wolf's eyes met hers, steady, unwavering. It was both warning and guide, a tether to the world she had once belonged to, and somewhere deep within her, she felt the first stirrings of doubt. A flicker of the child who had once sung with the sacred fire, danced with the river, and listened to the whispers of the ancestors. Lightning struck again, the sound deafening, and the raven screeched, thrashing violently. The girl's hands trembled as the shadows wavered, and for a single heartbeat, the mountains were silent. She realized the truth. The storm, the shadows. The raven's promises, they were not hers to wield freely. To continue down this path was to destroy everything she had ever known. And yet, in the stillness between heartbeats, she understood the danger. Even if she faltered, the raven would not relent. Its hunger would not stop, and the tribe would suffer as long as she remained under its sway. The storm had passed, leaving the mountains trembling and the forest still. The girl stood on the ridge, cloaked in shadow, the raven's shrieks finally fading into nothing. But the darkness that had once given her power now weighed heavy upon her spirit. The wolf spirit circled her eyes, glowing with unwavering resolve. Its claws struck the last of the raven's shadows, tearing through the twisted feathers that had bound her to its will. Lightning cracked one final time, illuminating the girl's face. A flicker of fear, of exhaustion, and of regret reflected. In her glowing eyes, the elders and warriors approached cautiously. Their chants, soft and measured, called upon the ancestors, invoking the Great Spirit to restore balance. They had not come to punish her, yet the path she had chosen had left her beyond the reach of mercy. The moment of choice had passed. "Child of dreams," the eldest said, voice echoing across the ridge, "we came to bring you home. But the shadows you embraced have severed the bond. It is too late." The girl's chest heaved. For a heartbeat, the pride that had carried her through storms faltered. She looked around at the mountains, the trees, the trembling wind, and saw the destruction she had caused. Crops would eventually regrow. Rivers would return to their courses. The tribe would heal. But she would not. Her lips quivered. I tried, she whispered, voice barely audible, above the wind. I thought I could wield the power without losing myself. I thought the ancestors would forgive. The wolf circled closer, a silent admonishment. It was not anger that gleamed in its eyes, but truth, the truth that pride and disobedience come at the greatest cost. The shadows that had clung to her dissipated with the wolf's final strike. The raven's presence had vanished into the void of the mountains. Silence followed, broken only by the wind whispering through the peaks. The girl fell to her knees. The shadow of the raven lifted, but a deeper shadow now remained, one that no ritual could undo, no ancestor could forgive. She was untethered from life as it had once guided her, a spirit neither of the village nor of the wilderness, suspended between worlds. The warriors and elders knelt at the ridge's edge, their faces solemn. They had won, yet victory was bittersweet. The girl's defiance had been crushed, her power diminished, but the cost was a permanent scar on the village's memory and the natural order they had fought to protect. The eldest stepped forward, raising his hand. His voice carried across the valley, steady and resolute. "By the will of the Great Spirit, and in the name of our ancestors, her name shall be erased. She shall walk the shadowed path alone, remembered by none. Songs shall not speak of her deeds, stories shall not carry her name, and no memory shall keep her presence alive. Let her fate serve as a warning. Those who betray the ancestors walk without shadow, remembered by none." A hush fell over the warriors. The air seemed heavier, the weight of the decree pressing into the valley. The girl's eyes flickered, catching the last light of the setting sun. Regret shimmered there, a flicker of what might have been if she had chosen differently. But it was too late. The ancestors had withdrawn their guidance. The Great Spirit had turned away, and the bond she had broken could not be mended. Her spirit was lost to shadow, her name gone from the living and the remembered alike. She rose slowly, her form wreathed in lingering mist, shadow clinging to her like a cloak. She looked at the village one last time, at the people she had once loved, at the elders who had warned her, at the wolf that had guided her. And then, without a word, she turned toward the mountains, walking into the wilderness alone. Her steps made no mark in the snow or soil. Her presence left no trace. The wind carried only whispers of warning, reminders of the choices she had made. The villagers returned to their lodges. The sacred fire burned steadily once more, rekindled, with reverence and care. The rivers flowed, the crops would grow, and the animals returned to the forests. Sensing balance restored, life continued. Yet the absence of her name left an invisible mark, an echo of betrayal that would be passed down not in stories of her deeds, but in lessons of caution and respect. The elders spoke quietly among themselves, remembering the events and the lessons they had learned. Let all remember. The eldest murmured, power without respect for the ancestors and harmony is destruction, and those who betray the sacred path walk unseen, unnamed, and unremembered. In the wind that swept through the village, some thought they heard the faintest whisper of a name lost to shadow, but it carried no warmth, no identity, only the echo of a warning. Would you risk your name, your spirit, your place among the ancestors for a taste of forbidden power? The elder's words seemed to linger in the hearts of all who listened. The girl disappeared into the mountains, walking without shadow, without memory. Her spirit bound forever to the consequences of pride, defiance, and betrayal. The wolf watched her vanish from the ridge, then turned back toward the village, guiding the people safely home, ensuring that the balance, though tested, would endure. The story closes in the hush of the forest and the whisper of the wind, carrying the lesson across generations. And so, her story is told without a name, a warning carried by the wind,